Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to Write a Killer Mystery, where we talk about making a good mystery great. And my name is Zara Altair. Today I want to talk about who's on first in your story. Before that, I want to thank my patrons for their continued support for these videos and for my writing. And if you like these videos, I would certainly appreciate your support. It doesn't take much to add your support. So you'll find the link to Patreon below. Okay, so story beginnings. Introducing your story to your reader. The first few pages of your story tell the reader whether they want to read more, and that's it. Your reader won't wait for you to get ready to begin to commence. Your opening pages are an appetizer for the main meal of your story, so you want to get right to it. The first 10 pages or the first chapter will set your reader's expectations for the rest of the book. And if you want them to continue through the next 300 pages or so, give them a good reason to keep reading. You want to tempt your readers with anticipation for a good read, and right at the beginning is the time to introduce your story and your story elements. How you tell your story now creates your reader's desire to continue. So first you want to show how you tell the story. Deciding how you start your mystery influences everything that comes later in your story, and knowing your need to introduce your detective soon, you still need to make a story so you can set the story in motion. So right away your reader will know the point of view. Was it first person or third person? You demonstrate the narration and the narrator's voice. And either way, whether it's first person, your character telling the story, or third person, you want to give your reader a sense of how that story is going to be told, because this is an invitation to keep reading that story voice. All right. And you set the tone for your story as well. Is it dark? Is it dramatic? Is it thoughtful? Is it touched with humor? You want to know enough about your story to set the tone. And if you change the tone later, your reader will feel cheated by the beginning. It's like a bait and switch sale where, oh, I thought it was going to be this, but oh no, you don't have that. You have this instead. This disappoints readers, and they can stop reading right then and there if you do that. So whatever your tone is, whatever tone you want to set for your story, you want to start it right there at the beginning so the reader knows this is the way the story is going to feel. That's what the tone does. All right. You also want to be true to your genre. If your story is a mystery, you want to hint at how you'll be setting up the puzzle. And this is often the introduction to your detective. But you want to make it feel like this person is going to be a detective. And you want to make it feel like a mystery is coming, and it's coming very soon. So first of all, of course, you want to introduce your protagonist. Don't waste your time. Get right to him, because this is the character that leads your reader through the rest of your story. So give them a name and introduce them in action, and show skills that your detective is going to use later on. Just highlight a couple of those skills in those first few pages. You're not at the inciting incident first. You may probably haven't discovered a body, but you give your reader a sense of how your protagonist will meet more significant challenges later on in the story. You want your reader to care enough about your character, your detective, to follow them through solving the puzzle through the rest of your story. And you get your reader to care by developing empathy. You have the rest of your novel to expand on the setting and introduce other characters and plunge your detective into the mystery puzzle of your story. For now, right at the beginning, you want to build empathy between your reader and your detective. And the best way to build empathy is to show your sleuth in action, responding to a challenge. So this is how this character reacts to situations in life. It doesn't have to be a big situation. It just needs to be some kind of challenge that demonstrates and illustrates how your detective responds to challenges in his world. Even if it's a small one, you want to have a challenge. So starting out with dressing your character or having them sip their morning coffee or whatever isn't the way to start. To start by plunging your reader into some situation with your character. It's going to make a huge difference on getting them immediately involved, immediately engaged, and caring about your character. That's what you want to do in these first few pages. And introduce a character opinion. So we're going to see how your hero responds to this challenge, whatever it might be. And your sleuth is going to have opinions about people, about situations. Share those opinions. Give your sleuth some kind of opinion, at least one, because it creates an immediate emotional connection with your reader. Even if they don't agree with the opinion, they still have an emotional connection to your character's opinion. It's a great way to create a connection between the reader and your character right there at the beginning. It's like, okay, so if this character thinks this way, I want to see how this character is going to solve a mystery. So you have a chance to state that opinion and raise questions in your reader's mind and help them connect with your character right away. It's the reader's view into your character's psyche. You have a sense of Phillips Kerr's detective burning Gunther in March Violets and all the succeeding Bernie Gunther stories right on that first page, and it's because he has opinions. He has opinions about the Nazi regime. So it doesn't have to be that strong, but give your character an opinion. It will create an immediate connection with your reader. And also, right there at the beginning, you want to be in the story world. So ground your reader in the place and time. Give them some details about your character's surroundings, so that's immediate details about your character's world. Is it urban or rural, or coastland or inland, or small town or city? The setting doesn't matter. It's the details. What matters is showing your readers where they are and how your protagonist responds to his or her surroundings. It's pretty simple, but you want to get them grounded in where they are. And you also want to give them a sense of the time in history. Is it present day with everyone wearing masks? Is it Victorian London? Is it 14th century France? The time of your story reflects cultures and mores that may or may not be familiar to your reader, and you can expand on those later, but help them understand the story world just by introducing them to the physical setting. And then one more thing I wanted to add here about setting, and that is beginning writers can make mistake about the character's everyday world with daily activities like eating or getting up or a multitude of mundane tasks. That's not the character's everyday world as it applies to a novel. In a novel, the character's everyday world is showing your protagonist interacting with the world and the people in it. So the sooner you get to some little obstacle, some little confrontation, and show how your detective responds, you're really giving your reader a sense of, oh boy, here's a story, and who is this, and how are they going to react? And then another thing that you want to set right at the beginning of your story is your prose style, your story style. How do you tell the story? Do you write short, snappy sentences, or do you play with words and syntax? And whatever your prose style, you want to remain consistent throughout the story. So be sure when you start that this is the style that is going to continue through the rest of the story, because readers don't like surprises, and they don't like teases at the beginning where the beginning starts one way and then the rest of the story is is told in a completely different way. It's disappointing. So you want to remain consistent throughout the story. Readers have preferences, and you're giving your reader a clue as to whether your prose style meets their preferences, and they are going to continue reading for the rest of the story, which is what you want them to do. And then editor Cheryl Clark said in a recent article, let me read this quote, "It's the words you choose for the character to say. Do they describe their grandma as a pretty feisty for an older lady or a tough old vulture? It's the way they think, which direct thoughts you give them, which insights or blind spots they have." So it's really important to set that style, because your reader's going to have a connection with the way the story is told. And then, of course, I mentioned this briefly before, you want to start with action. There's no sipping coffee, there's no getting up and all of that stuff. Action needs to be meaningful for the character and the story. So action just to have action isn't meaningful, and worse, it's a tease to your reader. So don't start with a fight scene because there's lots of action, but the fight scene doesn't have anything to do with the story. You're going to disappoint your reader. A smaller action that reveals your hero's character is much more meaningful to your reader than a big fight scene. You build your story context with small actions showing your character interacting with their world. You build the meaning later, action by action. You start with the small actions, and you keep showing how your character responds to these situations. And of course, as the story progresses, some of these situations are going to be very, very challenging. But right now, you're giving a hint of how your sleuth responds to the world around them, how they deal with people, how they deal with their environment. In the beginning, think of your hero with a challenge, however small, that reveals character traits and sets up future conflicts to those character traits. Recently, S.A. Cosby masters this technique for each of his characters, not just the main character, for each of his characters in Blacktop Wasteland. It's an amazing book. I highly recommend. If you're writing mysteries, I highly recommend reading that book. It's quite phenomenal. So, what are your heroes' main stakes for taking action? And do the action and the stakes foreshadow bigger conflicts later? So, what you're doing right now is you're setting up your reader in the beginning. You're setting them up to by giving them clues. You're giving them clues as to how this story is going to progress, how it's going to be told, how your main character deals with their world, and also at the same time you want to have how can I say this? You want to create a sense of movement. You don't want this beginning scene or chapter to be static. The story doesn't start after the first few pages. That's what I said before. You're not getting ready to begin to commence. It's like, it's now. And it starts now in your story. And when you plunge your hero into action, you move the story to the consequences of the action. Right away, your reader gets some movement. And it's like, okay, well, whoa, how's he gonna deal with this? What's she gonna do when this is all over? And your reader needs to ask that question from the very beginning. How is this character going to deal with this situation? So even if you start with a very small conflict at the beginning, you're setting up your reader to show them how your character interacts with the world, how your character responds to action, and what decisions they make after they take that action lead the reader to ask more questions. And that's what you want at the beginning of the story. It's like, whoa, what's going to happen next? I want to find out more about this character. Without a hint of the story to come, there's no reason for your reader to keep reading. So you want to create that sense of movement. All right. And then, of course, there is the all-important first sentence. This is the hook. This is the first hook. When your reader picks up your story and starts reading, the first sentence is the hook. Many authors save writing the first sentence until they've completed the whole novel because they want that first sentence to hint at everything that is to come. It's very challenging because it is the most important sentence in the story. Okay, so I love this quote from Jacob Appel. An opening line should have a distinctive voice, a point of view, a rudimentary plot, and some hint of characterization. So that's a lot to put in that first sentence. And that's why I really suggest taking your time about creating that first sentence. There's a lot of work for that sentence to do. So as you continue writing your story, I suggest you set up a file, an online file or a piece of paper, however you keep your notes for your story, that you continue making a list of possible first sentences, and you may, change the wording around and do all that stuff. It's perfectly normal. And what I want to say is you don't have to start off your novel when you're first writing with the most brilliant first sentence ever. Give yourself time to work on that first sentence. Put one in place as a placeholder and then work on it so it's completed as you finish your story. So, what is the whole idea of today's episode on Write a Killer Mystery? Who's on first in your story? Well, who's on first in your story is you. You are. Your job in the first chapter is to bring the reader into the story. And as a writer, you want to be there with all of these ways to get your reader involved, get your character revealed, your hero's character revealed, because the old adage is never more true than at the beginning of a story. You have only one chance to make a first impression. So you define the course of the story opening. The beginning is your story's first impression, and the beginning starts the reader on the path to the conclusion, and you want to plant the first seeds so they can grow as the story progresses. Okay, thank you very much. I hope this helps. It's the beginning is so important, and you want to plunge your reader into the story. I think if you take away one thing from this episode, it's get going with the story right away. Introduce the hero, give them some action, let the reader feel like the story's moving forward, and you're on your way. Okay, once again, I want to thank Audible for sponsoring Write a Killer Mystery. And one of the things I discovered recently is that I had never read it. I read a lot of Dickens, and I read Wilkie Collins' Moonstone when I was 12. That was my Dickens period. But anyway, for some reason, I had never read The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins. And so I decided, hey, it's the first mystery, I've got to read it, right? And so I went on Audible and looked for an Audible edition. And what do you know? There was a free version for Audible subscribers. There's several different versions on Audible, so you get to take your pick. But what I wanted to stress today is that once you become a member of Audible, there are books that are available to you for free just for being a member. Okay, so if you haven't experienced Audible and you haven't experienced listening to stories read by very talented narrators, I highly suggest that you give Audible a try. There's a link to the free trial in the description below, so go ahead and give it a try. It's lots of fun. All right, thank you. Keep writing, and I will see you next time.